Tenet is one of the most complicated Nolan films to date, which is saying quite a lot when you consider the fact that Christopher Nolan has made films like Inception and Interstellar. What makes it so difficult is the multiple interactions between forwards and inverted objects, which is made even more complicated when we see multiple scenes from both the forwards and the inverted perspective. In fact, scenes like the highway chase, where we see multiple objects and multiple perspectives, was so difficult to film that even Nolan himself required assistance to figure out exactly what he was filming. This came in the form of previs being done by VFX supervisor Andrew Jackson on multiple complicated scenes, where low quality CGI renders of these scenes were produced to help the filmmakers on set understand exactly what to film. In my previous video, we looked at the secrets behind 5 of the action sequences in Tenet, and today we're going to be looking at even more. So before we start this video, I'd recommend you take a look at that video, and also please consider leaving a like on the video and subscribing, as it really does help out the channel. There's also some minor spoilers ahead, so I'd recommend you watch the film first. Now, Tenet is based on the existence of machines called turnstiles, which have the ability to reverse people. And although the existence of reverse people is fiction, there are some parts of the film that do have a basis in real science. One of these is that the turnstiles are based on the ability to reverse entropy, which, unlike every other law of physics, only runs in one direction, the direction of disorder. For example, when a piece of glass falls on the floor, it moves in the direction of disorder by shattering, and the idea of Tenet is that these machines would be able to reverse that law, allowing the glass to reform. And in order to write the rules of inversion, writer and director Christopher Nolan consulted world-renowned physicist Kip Thorne, who previously served as a consultant on one of Nolan's earlier films, Interstellar. And it was through talking with Kip that the idea for inverted people to wear oxygen masks came about. The first scene in the film is the prologue, which, as I mentioned in my previous video, was the first time we saw inversion as a concept. But this Kiev opera house where the scene takes place wasn't actually filmed in Kiev, or even in Ukraine. It was actually filmed in Tallinn, Estonia, where certain scenes in the film do take place, like the highway chase. This opera house is in reality a concert hall called Lena Hall, and was constructed for the 1980 Moscow Olympics when Estonia was a part of the Soviet Union. However, for around 10 years the venue has been derelict, meaning that for production, the venue had to be renovated, with the need to rebuild the stage, fix the lighting, and even rebuild some damaged outside walls. But in the end, the hard work paid off, with the scene being more memorable than if it was filmed in a studio. And the terrorist shooting that we see in the prologue was actually based on a real-life event, the Nord-Ost siege. This event took place in Moscow and involved the siege of the theatre by Chechen terrorists, just like the terrorists who take control of the Kiev Opera House in Tenet. But the similarities don't end there, as just like in the film, a chemical agent was pumped into the building to knock those inside unconscious, although in reality this was done by the government to stop the terrorists and did not involve the CIA, like in Tenet. Now, as I mentioned in my previous video, the inversion mechanics of the film presented many difficulties, one of which was that scenes that were shown from a forwards and a reverse perspective had to be filmed in 4 different ways. Now, you may think this is overly complicated, as it would seem that simply acting out the scene in 2 ways, both forwards and reverse, would be enough. But the reason it was necessary to film in 4 ways was because of a rule that the filmmakers set early on in production, which meant that they couldn't film a scene one way and then simply reverse the footage in post for another part in the film, meaning that whenever we see an inverted version of a scene in the film, all the footage is entirely new, and not simply reversed footage from the forwards version of that same scene. So for example, when we see the fight scene for the second time in the film, but from an inverted perspective, all the footage we see is entirely new, and not simply reversed footage from earlier on. Another of those scenes that was shown twice in the film was the highway chase, and due to having to be filmed in so many different ways, it took the crew 3 weeks to film the scenes on this highway. As most of the scene is filmed practically, this required almost 5 miles of the 6-lane highway in Tallinn, Estonia to be closed, with a team of 20 stunt drivers from California driving both the main cars and the background cars featured in camera, including Jim Wilkie, who famously drove the flipped Joker truck in The Dark Knight. Jim Wilkie was also featured in the plane crash scene, but instead of driving a truck, he was driving the vehicle that towed the Boeing 747 itself. This is because, for safety reasons, the plane was not allowed to taxi under its own power, meaning that in filming, the plane is initially towed by a vehicle and then is transferred to a cable system for the actual crash. Now, following the initial highway chase, the protagonist is captured by an inverted satyr and taken into a warehouse, where we first see the inverted satyr interrogate the protagonist by speaking backwards, and then when the characters move through the turnstile, we see the same interrogation from the other perspective, with satyr speaking forwards and the protagonist speaking backwards. But what you may not know is that this wasn't simply done by reversing whatever lines the actor spoke, and that the actors actually had to learn how to speak backwards. This was particularly difficult for actor Kenneth Branagh, who played Andre Satyr, because not only did he have to deliver his lines in reverse, but he also had to deliver them in a heavy Russian accent. And finally, we come to the final battle, which takes the scale of inversion of the film from a hallway in an airport to an entire battlefield. But what you may not know is that the location of Stalsk 12, the fictional Russian city where the battle takes place, is actually a ghost town in California called Eagle Mountain. Here there exists an old iron mine, which left behind large structures like these arches that were used prominently in promotion material, as well as this structure which was used as the entrance to the turnstile. Production designer Nathan Crowley then used large-scale models, or bigatures, to give the look of large buildings by using forced perspective with the cameras, in order to avoid having to use CGI. In addition, instead of creating many CGI soldiers, as most large-scale films would do, Nolan's team used hundreds of extras who were ex-military, as it was necessary for them to be used to carrying heavy weaponry and gear for the entire 10 hours of shooting a day. And to film scenes involving the actual turnstile during the climactic battle, Stage 16 at Warner Brothers, which was previously used by Nolan to film Satyr's castle in Inception, was used. So that's it for today's video. Please be sure to like the video if you enjoyed, and to subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Also be sure to leave a comment down below of any suggestions that you have for other films or other scenes that you'd like me to talk about. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.